Well, it's a great day to have a nice talk about everything you need to know to get started in raising chickens in a cold climate like Canada or many other places around the world. And I'm going to basically go over piece by piece everything you need to know, including how you deal with the water, how you deal with the housing, whether or not you need heat in your coop, what do you use for bedding, how do you maintain a certain level of laying, and all of that good stuff that has to do with chickens. You don't normally get day-old chicks during the winter time, but I will go over some of the basics on how to brood your babies too. The Hidden Spring Farm is located in Horseshoe Valley, Ontario, Canada, so we have a lot of experience in dealing with very harsh Canadian winters. This here is the Chateau du Palais chicken house. I built this a couple years ago. It's octagonal and it houses 7 different coops. Right now we have 4 different breeds of chickens, so we're gonna go in and get started. Raising chickens can be very, very rewarding, and also in today's day and age, eggs start to creep up in price, and maybe you want to have a few backyard chickens to keep your constant flow of eggs. This here is Big Red. He's looking a little handsome today. He's our Rhode Island red rooster, and we call him Big Red really because he's a huge beast. He's a bodybuilder. Chickens don't really need that much from us humans in order to live a happy-go-lucky life. We basically have to provide them some kind of shelter. Usually it's a coop. We need to provide them some food, and we need to provide them some water. Now the shelter itself, or your chicken coop, is quite important. It of course depends on how many chickens you want to keep, but you want it to be size appropriate for your birds. And of course you have to confirm with your local municipality whether or not you're even allowed chickens, because Mr. Government likes to tell us what we can and can't do, eh? I know that a lot of municipalities, even if they do allow you a few chickens, there's a limit on the chickens, and whether or not you can have a rooster is always up in the air. You'll notice our roosters are crowing and crowing. We have 1 rooster for each flock, and basically our property is 90 acres and we are an agricultural, rurally zoned, so it's not an issue. But if you're living in town or on the suburbs, you might have to confirm that. I don't know why municipalities always think that roosters are the problem. You can hear the hens. They make a lot of racket too. So if you're talking about decibel level of noises, the hens can make just as much noise as the roosters. I don't know. I don't make the rules. A couple of quick things that chickens need for their coop is they need protection from the weather, right? And that includes the rain, the snow, the sleet, the wind, because you definitely don't want the wind to come in. Although you do want ventilation in your coop, but you don't want the wind coming in. Those are 2 different things. And you want to protect them from the weather, right? You don't want your chickens to get wet. You don't want a buildup of moisture in your coop, because that can just lead to frostbite and other hypothermic type issues. You also want your coop to be predator proof, so you don't want raccoons or fox or coyote or whatever kind of predator that you have wherever you live around the world. You don't want them getting inside your coop and killing your chickens, because that's the worst. Another thing you want to decide is whether or not you're going to be free-ranging your chickens. If you are going to be free-ranging your chickens, then you probably don't need a run. But if you are not going to be free-ranging your chickens, then you should have a run area. This is a protected area that the chickens can go outside of their coop and live their day. They can scratch, they can run around, they can peck, and you can have activities out there, and sometimes you can even have them covered. Like in our case with our octagonal coop, right? This is a run right here, and it has the roof and everything, and it's all kind of protected. There is a little bit of weather that comes in from the side, but it's minimal, especially on this side. So you want to have it covered if you are going to have a roof. Otherwise it'll just get snowed on and rained on, and the interior will get all mucky, and the chickens aren't going to enjoy that, and you're not going to enjoy that either. This right here is Michael Jackson. He's our light Sussex rooster, and he's a really good guy. He never gives me any grief, and he's a really great rooster for the flock. Now, one of the questions I get asked about probably the most is whether or not you need to have a heated coop. And the quick answer is that no, you don't need to heat the coop. Chickens have feathers. Chickens have an air pocket in between the skin and the feathers that they fill up with air, and then they puff themselves up and they go side by side, so on and so forth. As long as you protect them from the wind, protect them from the weather, they're fine. And we have experience with that for several years now, and it's not an issue. Now that being said, you have to be aware of where you live. If you live somewhere in Siberia or Alaska or really northern Canada where it really gets cold, then you may need to insulate your coop and you may need to provide some auxiliary heat to help them make it through those really cold nights. And a really great example that we've dealt with this harsh winter is with this guy. This is Elvis Presley. You can see his comb has frostbite. You see, this is a comb that's coming in pretty fresh. This is the dead part that's kind of almost fallen off, but it's not quite fallen off. He's doing much better. We thought we were going to lose him, but I did provide those heaters in his coop because, you know, I was worried about him and he wasn't doing that great. And he doesn't normally need heat. I've never given our birds heat before, and we didn't give heat to any of the other birds, just this dude right here to try to help him survive this bad winter. Now, when I built this chicken house, I put electrical in here. So each coop does have an electrical outlet. It's a convenience thing for me, and it's my choice. Not everybody has the ability to do that. And maybe if you have an off-grid coop, you can run an extension cord or something like that, but that's not advisable. It's just my preference to have electrical in my coop. I'll show you why. Hello. So an example of some heat could be something like this. This is a heat lamp, and you just, let me get it turned on here, and that bulb gets hot. Make sure it has a cage, because you don't want, if this falls down, you don't want the bulb to be able to touch your straw. That's a fire hazard. But there's also this kind of heater here. This is a wall heater. And basically that gives off a little radiant heat, and there's no chance of getting that on fire. See, I have electrical right here, and then I have this waterer, okay? This is a heated poultry drinker, and basically you see it's heated 2-gallon. There's kind of a heated element under here, and the chickens can just peck a little bit of the water right there, and it does not freeze. Even though we've been so frigid, doesn't freeze, keeps the water thaw, and it doesn't make a big mess in here too. But Elvis has a little tiny pet bowl there. That's heated as well. So I have seen those styles, but they get dirty every time the chicken takes a drink. It gets dirty. I also have lighting in here for me as I work, and inside each individual coop I have lighting. And what that helps you with is if you choose to give your birds supplemental light. What happens with chickens when the days are shorter in the winter and there's not as much daylight and it's too cold and such, the chickens really drop off their egg production. And there are a lot of people that want to continue the egg flow, and they give some extra light, and it kind of imitates the daylight and tricks the bird into thinking that it's daytime, and they continue to lay. Now, me personally, I'm a believer that a hen has a finite amount of eggs in her life to lay. So what we do is just let the chickens be natural. Now, we have a lot of birds. We never run out of eggs. If you only have 4 birds, you might go through a period where you're not getting any eggs if you don't supplement the light. But we have so many chickens that it's not an issue. I think I'd rather give the hens a rest during the winter so that they can lay for a longer period of time. Like, most hens will lower their egg production maybe by the 3rd year, 4th year, sometimes even the 2nd year. But some of our birds are already 4 years old and they're still laying eggs. So I'd like to think that they're gonna lay at least into the 5th and 6th year because I didn't do the supplemental light trick. Now, if you don't have electricity in your coop and you can't have like a heated poultry drinker, I think you're going to have a tough time, and what's going to happen is your bowl of water is going to freeze, and you're going to have to kind of break up the ice and fill up fresh water every day. There's a lot of people that do it that way too, and it's not a problem. I just like winter efficiency because it's so cold. There is a whole slew of tricks all over YouTube of people saying if you put a salt water bottle, it won't freeze. If you put beet juice, it won't freeze. I've come to the conclusion that yes, some of them will work when it's somewhat cold, but when it's frigid, windy, cold temperatures, they don't work. Nothing works except electricity. You should also think about where you're going to get water from. What we have here on our farm are frost-free yard hydrants, and that basically helps us get water all year long, and the pipes won't freeze. But if you just have a tiny backyard flock, you can simply fill up a bucket from your kitchen faucet or from your garden hose or whatever, as long as you drain the hose. Now, if you're talking feeders for chickens, you could just use a simple rubber bowl like this. They're available at any farm store, very durable, and the chickens get their feed. I don't necessarily like using this because the chickens sometimes will scratch and spill the bowl and it just becomes a mess. But we also use these poultry feeders, and that really allows the chicken to peck and get the food, but not scratch and make a mess and not waste too much food. We've been following the deep bedding method or the deep litter method for the past few years, and that's basically, for those who don't know, you put straw down or some kind of bedding like pine shavings or something, and then the chickens will dirty it all up and poop everywhere, and then you put another layer, and the chickens will poop it all up again, and you put another layer, and you keep doing that, and it kind of builds up this insulation of the floor that helps keep the coop warm in the winter, or it's supposed to anyway. Lately, I've been testing this sand bedding where it's basically some kind of construction sand, and it looks nice and neat, and it should be relatively easier to scoop up the chicken poops and sift out the sand, so you're not having to completely change the bedding all the time and give yourself all that extra work. So this winter we did both. We had some with the deep bedding and one with the sand, and the sand worked very well. The chickens did very well. It wasn't any issue, so I think I'm going to move forward and do a lot more of the coops with sand. Along with the predator proofing, you could take the extra step of rodent proofing as well. And I'm in the process of doing that in our coop right now, where I'm laying 1/2-inch hardware cloth all along the floor, all along the ground, and stapling it to the wood framing so that the rats can't enter. But not everybody's going to have this issue. Sometimes coops can be built raised off the ground as well. Now, when it comes to the feed, you can get your chicken feed at any local co-op or any farm store. You know, you'll have to do a little bit of research from wherever you are. And in my experience, there's a few different kinds of chicken feed, but there's also scratch. Sometimes it's 3-grain scratch, sometimes it's 5-grain scratch. And then with the feed, there's also crumble feed and granular feed, kind of like pellet feed. The chicken scratch kind of looks like this. Could be all sorts of grains and seeds and cracked corn and sunflower seeds. That's what we use. But we also use this granular pellet kind of feed, and this just allows for a little bit less waste. And sometimes for the younger birds, I like using this crumble stuff. This is really great because it's a little bit smaller bits, but it still has the same protein as the layer feed. You also need to think about where you're going to put your feed. We have these kind of steel trash cans, so the mice and the rodents and the insects and anything can't get in. So I would highly recommend these kind of storage bins. Here in Canada anyway, you can pick these up from Princess Auto. You can pick these up at Canadian Tire too. Now, you shouldn't really be in a situation during the winter anyhow that you're getting day-old chicks or even hatching day-old chicks, but you never know what your situation is. We had a rooster die in the middle of the winter. We took a bunch of the hen's eggs and we hatched out some barred rock chicks. Those are all Freddie Mercury's offspring, and if I hadn't have done that, then we wouldn't have any replacement roosters for Freddie Mercury, sadly. So that's the reason why we went ahead and did that. But here in Ontario, one of the big hatcheries is Fry's Hatchery, F-R-E-Y-S. And I don't even know if you could buy directly from Fry's. Maybe if you were to drive there to their hatchery. They have deals with local co-ops that you put your order in and then you just go to the co-op to pick up your order. That usually happens in the spring and early summer. But elsewhere in Canada, I'm not really quite sure. That's just a little bit of research anyone will have to do in whatever region you are. But in case you are in the situation of having to get some chicks, you just make sure you keep them in a small container. It's called a brooder. In the early days of these chicks, we were using a small Rubbermaid container, and it works very well. There's a tiny little chick feeder and a chick waterer that you can get. You can keep them warm with either a heat lamp or a heat plate. I use a heat plate just because there's less risk of fire. The chicks like going underneath the heat plate because it kind of imitates going underneath the mama hen. And once they get a little bit of feathers, then you can transition them into a coop. Then you can transition them into a separate area of your coop. You don't ever want to mix young chicks or pullets or cockerels in with the adult birds because hens can get a little bit protective. There is a technique though where you wait until the evening time when it's night and then you sneak a new bird into the coop and then they're just all roosting and sleeping for the night, and then when they wake up in the morning and go about their day, there just happens to be a new bird there and they're none the wiser. Now these are Freddie Mercury's babies right here. There's 4 boys and 3 girls. You can see that guy right there. He's a boy. He's a cockerel. You see his big comb? And then that one right there is a girl. You see her comb. So she's a pullet. And we basically have 3 pullets and 4 cockerels. And we managed to let these guys survive with those heat lamps all throughout the winter. And so far so good. They're so big now. Now we haven't done it, but you can consider certain breeds of chickens that tend to do better in a cold climate situation. And I'm talking basically about the size of the bird, the size of the combs and wattles, because those always seem to take the most damage in the winter. Now just in our experience, the Rhode Island Red is a great breed. The rooster does have a little bit of a bigger comb and wattle, but he does very well in the winter. The hens do very well in the winter, and they lay the most amount of eggs out of all of our chicken breeds. We also have the light Sussex and the Plymouth Barred Rock. And both of those breeds do very well in the cold climate as well. And they have somewhat smaller combs, and it just helps them to last through the cold. The other breed that we have here is Black Leghorn. And I think the Black Leghorn, the White Leghorn, and all the other Leghorns don't exactly do very well in the cold. They are an Italian bird, and they don't really have a lot of fat on them. They're very, very lean, and they're very skittish birds. So that's probably why our Elvis is having a little bit of a hard time dealing with the snow in the winter. But there's also a lot of other breeds that do well in the winter, like the Australorp or the Brahmas or the Cochins, and there's a whole bunch of other kinds too, you know, like the Americana, the Buffs, you know, the Orpingtons. Then for all you Canadians out there, there's the Chanticleer chickens, which is originated in Quebec. So that's always a great breed for a lot of us Canadians. I think if you're trying to pronounce it in French, it's Chanticleer. But anyways, that's really good breed because they have really small combs and wattles, eh? Well, hopefully you enjoyed the video and it's informative for you in case you want to get yourself some backyard chickens. So really do appreciate you watching. See you next time.